My name is Mark McGee, and I am the director of the land department for the Blackfeet tribe. Um, I also serve in the capacity of the chairman of the board for the Blackfeet Indian Land Trust, which is a nonprofit private land trust that is specifically for um, protecting lands on the Blackfeet Reservation.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it means to be a planner at the Blackfeet Nation?
Um, what it means to be a planner on the Blackfeet Reservation is, I think, very challenging. There are just so many issues to deal with, and so many intricacies as far as land use and land dynamics and land ownership. So planning is difficult at best, but very necessary. It's just the whole issue of jurisdictional problems with not only tribal policies, but federal policies, state policies, even as far down as local governments, the counties in the city. So you're dealing with a lot of people in a lot of different jurisdictions. So planning takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of people working together, and really working for the best interest of what the resource is.
Can you tell us specifically some of the things you're working on in planning right now?
Some of the bigger projects that we're working on with the Blackfeet tribe is number one is the Buffalo Initiative, or in the Blackfeet word, it's the INI Initiative, which is really restoring bison to the landscape as a wildlife, similar to deer and elk, um, and really bringing them back to where they came from, and making them a part of our culture and our subsistence again. Um, so that's a huge project, and it takes a lot of work by a lot of different agencies. I've recently been involved with the land buyback program, where we, through the federal government and the Eloise Cabell settlement, the Blackfeet tribe was able to reacquire about 324,000 acres of land on the reservation. So that land is now owned by the Blackfeet tribe, which makes management in my capacity a lot more work, but it's sometimes a little bit easier too, because we're now the owners of more land, and we can exercise more control and jurisdiction on those lands too. Um, Day-to-day operations of the tribal land department are varied. We do a lot of right-of-way work with transportation departments, utility companies. We're working on a number of tribal projects too that involve land and location. Of course, we're working on a new Blackfeet Care Center. We're working on a dialysis center. We work with the housing authority almost on a daily basis in identifying lands for development of housing projects and things like that. So one of the bigger projects that came about with this latest tribal council is the Blackfeet agriculture, or revitalizing the Blackfeet agriculture program, where we're looking at really doing almost corporate farming for the Blackfeet tribe, and identifying lands that are best suited for those purposes, and acquiring new lands that we can utilize, so we're not displacing anybody. We're just buying something outright, and we can just start production. So lots of projects.
So out of the projects you're working on right now, what are some that you're most excited about?
Gosh. I'm excited about all of them. I mean, that's one of the benefits of my job is that it changes so much. Um, Being a land manager for the tribe is obviously challenging, but you look at land use as far as residential and economic development and agriculture and conservation and things like that, and so it changes all the time, and it makes it interesting, and it makes it exciting, and when you get to a point where you've completed a project and you can see it all the way through through that process is just a very good feeling. And so I'm excited about the INI initiative, about restoring buffalo to the landscape. I'm excited about the new care center. I've worked on things like the new grocery store for the tribe. I've worked on the hotel project. I've worked on the casino project, and so those are all great projects. And just seeing them through is really a good sense of accomplishment. So.
Want to tell us a little bit about the Blackfeet Land Trust?
Sure. So the Blackfeet Land Trust was an idea of the late Eloise Cabell, who most of us know through the Cabell lawsuit and the settlement. But really one of her most passionate projects, I think, was the Blackfeet Land Trust. And what she did there was she saw a need for the preservation and conservation of lands on the reservation in a way that really promoted the cultural sensitivity of the area and added an educational component of what that meant and what conservation looks like in the native sense or in the Blackfeet sense. And so she got together with some funders, created the land trust and created the board of directors, and they began to search out funding. And it was through the Nature Conservancy and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and some other funding agencies that they were able to raise enough money to purchase somewhat of a large block of land. It's about 640 acres west of Browning on the Blackfeet Reservation. And so that land is now owned by the Blackfeet Land Trust, and it does have a conservation easement on it that is to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and really the sole purpose of that easement is just to protect that land and keep it in its natural native state. And it's a great area because it has a lot of cultural value as far as plants and animals and wildlife, things like that. I was recruited to participate on the board shortly after they bought the ranch. Previously, they had several former tribal employees that were on the board and had since retired, so they were looking for a new board member, and they asked me to be on the board, which I gladly accepted. So now I'm actually the chairman of the board, and so what we've done there is we've a lot of thinking there, but so what we've done with the Blackfeet Land Trust lately is we've obviously just kept it in its natural state. We've partnered with Blackfeet Community College for some classes out there, with the local school district for field trips, just to see what conservation looks like in the native sense, and identifying culturally sensitive plants and things like that. So that was her dream for the Blackfeet Land Trust, and part of that dream was to keep it Blackfeet, but also to remove it from the governmental aspect of Blackfeet, and so there's not a lot of political decisions being made, or the politics aren't coming into the management of the ranch. It's just good people trying to do good things on native lands. So,
Can you tell us a little bit about what some of the challenges for reintroducing INI on the land is?
Some of the challenges for reintroducing the buffalo or the INI to the landscape are that they've been removed for so long that people don't see them as wildlife anymore, and the reintroduction probably nationwide has been in a closed confinement or capture system where they're treated more like more like livestock. They're fed and tagged and managed on that level, and so they really haven't been managed in a natural sense for a long time. And so our goal is to bring that back, and so that the buffalo become part of the landscape, like the deer and the elk and the moose, and they're there for people to enjoy, and for them to just be a part of who we are again. And so the challenge is to change the mindset of how people look at them, that they are not a livestock animal, that they are truly a wildlife animal, and that almost statewide, there's kind of been this controversy about bison competing with a cattle producer for the same resources, obviously, and then reintroducing diseases that have been eradicated, like tuberculosis and brucellosis and things like that. And so the challenge is to is the educational component, and bringing people to the table and helping them understand, what our goal is, and what the steps that we're taking to make sure that it happens as naturally as possible and as safe as possible, and that we're really not there to compete with anybody. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that all the stakeholders are at the table and that they're part of that planning process and thinking process, and even the decision making sometimes. And that's just one component. Again, of course, there's the whole land issue, and dealing with multiple jurisdictions. We're looking at creating a partnership, not only with reservation landowners, but also with those entities that border the reservation, like the Lewis and Clark National Forest, the Glacier National Park, Waterton Lakes National Park, the province of Alberta, and so that those animals really become a wildlife animal, where they are free ranging and they're crossing those political boundaries freely without any restriction, and are treated exactly like the deer and elk. So
I know there's some unique challenges you run into. Can you tell us a little bit about the pilot project up by Chief Mountain?
the pilot project for the reintroduction of the buffalo in the Chief Mountain area right now is working with a local landowner out there who owns a large block of land that is willing to lease us that land for a short period of time, and we're going to take a small herd of animals out there. Actually, we call them the Elk Island herd, and they're a herd of bison that we obtained from Elk Island National Park in Canada, that actually carry the true genetics of the area of the Blackfeet Reservation. So really, in a sense, those animals are making a full circle back to the Blackfeet Reservation. And so the pilot project that we're doing is taking those animals and reintroducing them to that landscape out there, and kind of getting them relocated as far as establishing their home range. And so they're young enough, and they're hopefully bred heifers. And so we want to get them out there so that in the springtime when they calve, that they really establish that as this is where home is. And so those calves are born there. The new mothers are being new mothers there, and it just becomes where they belong. And if we lease that land for a short period of time, and they make that connection to that land, and then we just kind of open the doors after that, and let them grow into the area, and so they'll always find that place home, but they'll have the freedom to wander where they want. So.
Thank you. What are some of the planning concerns of your tribe? Planning concerns.
For the project?
For the tribe in general.
Planning concerns?
Land planning concerns.
I think some of the planning concerns for the tribe in general are just making sure that all the stakeholders are at the table, and that when we make decisions that we include their concerns, we allow them to have a voice in those areas that are of value to them, and so that when we establish policies or regulations, that it's really not a Blackfeet Tribal Business Council decision, it's a Blackfeet tribe decision, and that all the people that wanted to be involved have been involved, all the people that needed to have their voice heard have been heard, and we make good management decisions based on those ideas. I think that one of the biggest issues that we're faced with is that we're really restricted as far as planning beyond our borders, so to speak, and that the tribe doesn't own all of the land that we want to plan for. Some of the land is owned by tribal members still, and some of it is owned by non-tribal members too, and being able to cross those lines sometimes is very precarious, and so we kind of have to tread lightly sometimes. It's again one of those things where if you bring them to the table and allow them to be a part of the process, then I think it makes planning a lot easier. So.
I'm just going to shift this over. Okay.
So given buyback and the future of buyback, what does the future of the Blackfeet Nation and its lands look like?
So the land buyback program has recently been completed on the reservation, and with that being said and done, the tribe has acquired about 324,000 acres. There's a huge misconception out there that there was 324,000 acres that was sitting somewhere else that we bought, and now we made it a part of the reservation, and that's not true. We bought 324,000 acres that was already here. It was already being managed. It was already being utilized by tribal members, and so there really isn't a big push for the tribe to change any of that. We just became the new owner of something that was already here. I think the goal always for the tribe is to promote the economic welfare of our tribal members, and the majority of that obviously is in the agriculture industry. And so if our tribal members are using those lands and they're being good stewards of the lands, there's absolutely no reason to change that. The benefit to the tribe is that the lease monies that they were paying now become a part of the income of the Blackfeet tribe. And so we estimate somewhat conservatively that there could be about anywhere from $2 million to $3 million in new revenue to the tribe every year, just from the purchase of those lands. So I think the goal of the tribal council now is to look at that income and see where it can best be utilized. And some of those ideas are purchasing lands that we couldn't otherwise purchase through land buyback. So looking forward to utilizing that new income to purchase lands that could not have been purchased otherwise through land buyback. Purchasing large blocks of land that had since been sold off to non-tribal members, and reacquiring that land and getting it back under the jurisdiction of the Blackfeet tribe. So that's one goal, and I think another goal is to look at maybe investing some of that money as far as capital improvements and things like the new Blackfeet Care Center or any other economic development projects that we can not only create additional revenue to the tribe, but also to create jobs and give people opportunities to work and make money for themselves.
We covered a lot, and if there's anything else you'd like to tell us about your work or your job, just open it up if there's anything more you'd like to tell us about planning your work.
I have a question if you don't have anything right away. So when
when we think about the Blackfeet Land Trust and given this buyback, what does it mean to carry on the legacy of Eloise Cobell, and what are the opportunities, and how do we carry on that legacy and all of her hard work?
Sure. And I guess all of the things we talked about with land buyback and the Blackfeet Land Trust, and all ties back to Eloise and all the work that she did. So if you think about really what her legacy is going to be, especially for the Blackfeet people, obviously there was a financial component of that to the stakeholders that she represented in the lawsuit. But at the end of the day, it's the land. Everything came back to the land. And when you think about that, what land buyback did is it brought all that land back to the Blackfeet tribe. And that land can never be sold. And it will always be a part of who we are and the Blackfeet Reservation. And then also her work with the Blackfeet Land Trust and creating even that small component of conservation for cultural purposes and native purposes, and giving the opportunity for children to see what that looks like and learn about that, and tying them back to the land and understanding that that's really where they came from and part of who they are. And I think that's going to be Eloise's legacy for